Yeah, thank you. And it's a wonderful, inspirational speech, I would say. It's more of experiential. And respected Dr. Ramakrishna, President of IPS South Zone, Dr. Suresh Kumar, Radhika Reddy, the chairperson of the Women Empowerment Committee, and other members, and Sunita Krishnan. I'm sure, I mean, she's still around, yeah. And she is a founder of Prajwala and the chief guest and guest of honor. We are really honored with your presence here. And I'm very happy to be here in this platform. And it's a wonderful feeling because I always believe, just like democracy, we say democracy is for the people, by the people, and of the people. Like I think I quote, the women empowerment is for the women, by the women, and of the women, and by all of us who believe in humanity. I think I add that. So, having said that, I feel that I'm a woman, I'm a feminist, but I became a humanist after I went to psychiatry. And after dealing with so many people, I think first I'm a human being. I forget about my gender. I'm a human being first. So I feel that women are, very, very important and integral part of society, and we are intrinsically, intertwined with men. In the sense, I'm not saying that we are not going to live without men. No, absolutely no. We have to live together. We have to bear each other. And for what? For the betterment of society. Like we are two pillars of the society. And coming to my keynote address, I just want to say why I chose. Like when I was talking about my keynote address, my husband said, "Why are you taking only 20% of the people? Who are, working people are very less, working women are less. The number of women who are at home suffering, and those are the people." I said, "See, listen, the contemporary women are totally different. The contemporary women are women who defy the traditional, the confinement of women to a particular, role and responsibility. These are the women who are prepared to have their womanhood. They would like to have the motherhood, and they would like to have their own, work life, their own career. They want to make something for the home, for the country. It's such a big challenge. So these are the contemporary women. They constitute only 20% of our country. Rest of the 80% are, they settle down. They are in the traditional forum. They're happy. Whether they're happy or not, whatever it may be, they got well adjusted. These are the people, they went through whatever challenges they have, they went through, they settle. So we need to look at the people who are going to take the challenges and how they deal with their challenges. This is something, I think these 20%, I'm sure slowly it's going to go up with the failing economy, and the homes are breaking. So women have to come out. Like, we all know that following World War, when people went to war, men went to wars, women started working. That's how women started working. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been. And they're being exploited because these people do a lot of work and they can be paid less wages. That's how women started working. So these contemporary women, we are all contemporary women. It's not that me and all of you who are privileged population, I would call it privileged population. We are educated, we have wonderful parents, or we had better chances, but we are not, and more than 80% of the people, they don't have this privilege of wonderful education. They don't have a privilege of a good home, as she was rightly pointing out. The girl childs are being, trafficked. So we are not that. But I'm talking about this 20, out of this 20% of the people, the number of people who are underprivileged. They're forced to get into the work, and they're facing a lot of challenges, socio-economic, socio-cultural. So I think we need to see the challenges they face, and we need to help them how they cope with the situation. Change is inevitable, as Sunatha Krishnan told. It is inevitable, and it is needed, and it produces challenges, it produces consequences, positive and negative. But we need to And it causes a lot of confusion for the woman, especially because she has got assigned roles and she has got assigned responsibilities. She has to take it's visible. Yeah, I'm sure all of you can see. Yeah, I'm
Yes, ma'am. No,
yeah.
not now.
Okay. Yeah, if all of you can see, I think I'll start
Yeah,
off.
you are visible.
Visible and audible, madam.
Yes, madam, it is visible, madam.
Having said this, I mean, why I chose this topic, I said, because it's going to, the number is going to go up, and we need to see how these people challenge and come out with the coping skills. And so we need to adapt it for next generations. I think it's one more very important thing which I would like to say is as a woman and having brothers, and then I worked with all men. And as a professionally, I never felt that women, my gender never came when I was working, right from my younger days, even now. When I'm working with other people, I'm a human being, I'm working with other human being. I respect other men and I expect the respect from people. Here, I would like to start my keynote address with a saying by Hobbes. He's a political philosopher from UK of 18th century. He gave such a wonderful message about a woman. Women may be whole ocean deeper than we are, but are also a whole paradise better. She may have got us out of Eden, or as a compensation, she makes earth a very pleasant and beautiful place. Such a wonderful quote. See, there are sensible men, and there are many men who appreciate women for what we are, and we have that capacity. And women, as everybody says, are like from Vedas, at least off late, thanks to Corona, I got so much of time to read, not medical or anything. I got time to read something about Vedas and about religion. I mean, I was reading about Christianity, I'm reading about Islam, I'm reading about Hinduism. Beautiful things are there. I would say, I think half of my life is wasted. You know, I won't say it's wasted. I was helpful to people. But what I mean to say, all Vedas and all scriptures say that women are the pillar. See, women is not there. Man cannot do yagas and other things. So women is such an important, like, you know, right from Vedas. So pillar and integral, she is a pillar and integral part of the society, and she keeps the, culture intact. She is the custodian. She plays different roles and difficult responsibilities. Oh God, I mean, bearing a child and delivering the child, bringing a human being out into this world and bringing out such a wonderful thing in the society she does throughout her lifespan. And she's like a key to sustainable development and quality of life. You just see, think of a man who is living in a room, he gets married, you know, the next day the room is beautified, you know, the whole color comes into that. I'm just giving a small example of it. She goes out and then, you know, all things are strewed. It's only women can clean up the mess in this world. And she plays multiple roles: wife, mother. She nurses anybody, you know, sick person. And she doesn't have, feeling of dirt or sickness and things like that. And she's a leader, I tell you, whether it's a home function or societal function, she is the one first stands first and start up the whole thing. She is a manager of the family. She knows who is capable of doing what, the interest, and she allots the works to people and she leads them. And she knows how to manage the income. I tell you, no chartered accountant can do this. It's only women who can do that. She knows which is, which should be used for comfort, which is a luxury. And she saves things. She always have positive budget, no deficit budget for women. So this is a lady in the family. So that means that she has got And why is she having a central place in the society and the family? Because of her psychological attributes. And this attribute is that she's a natural caregiver and spontaneous, and she's emotional, and she responds, and she's empathetic. It's just not responding. She empathizes with any person who is in that problem. A child is enjoying, she enjoys. If a person has a problem, like Sunita responding to the rape victims, she empathizes with them. This is something which women have. Not all people can have that. And she's intuitive. She knows what can be done, what can lead to. So these are the things. And she's wonderful in verbal memory, and she's languages. I'm reading about the book on brain and the sides, the both sides of brain, where left was given more importance, and now they say the right brain is very important for women. Right brain is more evolved. So, like women, we are good at verbal memory and language skills, and we are multitasking. Okay, you might be reading and you think about the cooker. After 15 minutes, I have to switch off the cooker. And you have to give medicine to your mother, old mother. So your brain is a clock. So she's multitasker. And such a lady with good qualities and central figure, what is it? Society has offered her. She is given secondary status. She has less access to social network. Men go around and make friends because of the responsibility she can't. And she doesn't feel really going out making network because she feels more responsible towards the family and for herself and for children. And she has less chances in decision making. Like especially in India, what they say, like your father decides for you when you are a daughter, and your husband decides for you when you are married. When you are old, your son decides for mother. So this is that when decision making, you don't have the capacity to make decision. So this is the second status. What is the gender role? We are in the patriarchal society, and it's a decided gender role. Women should be submissive, passive, and they should be very docile, and they should be listening, and they should be very sweet, beautiful. So these kind of gender roles are being assigned to women, and the responsibilities, huge responsibilities. Production, in the house, you produce food and you produce a lot of things for people, reproduce, and you care for everybody. And what is the world scenario? Let me see. And you see, in the world, we constitute 50% of the human resources. The UN report, the UN Secretary General report says that they constitute 50% of human resources with great potentiality next to man. Again, they put it next to man, but they agree that we have great potential to do something about it. And this is very, very disheartening. UNDP says that women constitute 70% of the world poor. They carry triple burden of productive, reproductive, and caring work. The same UNDP says again, no society treats its women as well as its men. These are the facts of life. And next, UN report 2000 says women constitute half of the population, perform 2/3 of the work, but receive 1/10 of the world income and owns less than 1/100th of the world's property. That's why women in the world are very poor. Let us come to the Indian scenario. Indian scenario, it's 48%. We women constitute only 48% of the illiteracy rate means people who can read and write. And also people who are educated. 80% of the men who are educated are literate. And undergraduates, we see 53%. Okay. And the MPhil is 69 and PhD. I'm not going to the percentage, but just want to more illiterate and less literate. And when you look at the total labor force, the women or the world, we constitute only 90%. The Western European countries and other things, they are between 60 to 80. That means people who work, earn their livelihood going out are only 20%. Rest of them all, the homemakers and sitting at home and depending on husbands. And the rural working women, because they do the household work as also they go as labor or agriculture workers, 73%. Whereas in urban, we are 60%. Who are all the people? They could be, the maid servants or the attenders or the people, saleswomen and all these cooks, all these people are small scale industry people. They all constitute 60% in the urban area. And we see, when you look at in India, the people who are in elevated positions, women are 14.4%, whereas CEOs are only 3.7%. So shameful. We're all educated, highly educated, but they don't reach that positions. Politics, in Indian parliament, we have only 14.5% representing the women population. Why do women work? Is it that out of option or compulsion, or why do they do it? So a lot of causes are there. Material aspirations. Women feel that we should have better house, maybe we own a house, or we need, like most of the people, at least more than the men, women would like to have a home and a car and better gadgets because they can go around and run around to do that. Better living conditions. At least they can, once in a while take a holiday, they can go to hotel, at least weekend they can enjoy. A necessity of daily life. If they want to give better clothes for children or better food for children or, the better school books or something like that, they need to have little more money. Husband's salary may not be enough. At least I remember 40 years back when I was a student in MAS, two of my great teachers, so I was quite upset with them. I asked them, why are you leaving? You are such wonderful teachers. You teach us, we love you. Please don't go. Then he said, see, listen, Gauri, you are a small kid now. You don't know. We are married. We are working. And, we have children to bring up. And I still remember Dr. Kalyan Sundar, my teacher, said, see, listen, Gauri, I just feel very difficult to get 2 pairs of socks for my children. I still remember. It's good to be academician and things like that. And, you need to give your children also amenities. And you are doctors, but you can't give amenities. So that is the necessities of daily life, force people to work. Women started working. Effective career, people like me, I'm career-oriented. I just want to work. I know I have to work hard, but I want to make a career. Having studied so much, I need to contribute to the society. I need to contribute to the human suffering. So there are people who get, and self-satisfaction. Yes, I've done something better than what I can do as a woman. Socialization, I go out to meet people, learn things. My perspective changes and I need to do social service like, Sunita Krishnan and, the Sudha Murthy, Infosys. I'm really admirer of her. So that is something. And financial independence, women need to have for each and everything. She can't ask. And then parallel income, insurance and social security. She goes for work because in the company, they'll have insurance. They can claim insurances for buying house or, for sickness, and there are security benefits. Unfortunately, we don't have wonderful security system you can see in UK and Scandinavian countries. The one which I have gone and seen is Denmark. Such a wonderful place, a Scandinavian country, Sweden, Finland. Their life is so secure. They made secure. And those are the things which the women would like to have their work and dependent on earnings for survival. If she's a single woman, she don't want to depend on other people. And financial compulsions due to incompetent husband or the parents, they don't have anybody, no sons. So the girl has to work and give them. And use of talent for the benefit of society. Make organizations work for the upliftment of downtrodden, disabled, or people who are destitute. So these are the things women would like to work. So who is a working mother? Let me leave all those things. I'll focus on working mothers because they have difficult tasks. There are 2 important tasks and very difficult tasks of combining career with added responsibility of raising a child and taking extra burden for the family benefit, family income. And these are 2 categories. One is staying at home and work from home. The other category is women like us, doctors. You can't work from home. You have to go, and nurses. And the physiotherapists. So there are so many people, they have to go, and some teachers and the therapists, they have to go and work from, they have to work in the office. So these are the people, but they still have the responsibility of the home. And we also do that 65% of the unpaid job assigned by gender and society. That means you are 20% plus your 65% of it is being added. So I may not be very good in mathematics, but simple calculations. So what are the challenges the working mothers face in the workplace? The moment working women goes there, they say, look, no, she's a mother. She can spare more time. She's preoccupied and she's not effective in functioning. These are the things that, the management has. I'm not talking about we doctors. I'm talking about all the working women who work in different places. And there's a lot of heightened expectations about these women. They are not efficient, they don't produce much, and they have to be effective. That is the dictum they have. And the gender discrimination. And they say, no, the higher jobs, they cannot do it. Like the projects and other things where they earn money is for men's. The things, supervisory job and, running after things and organizing things are given to women. And the negativity is that women are incapable of taking up big jobs. I'm not talking about higher strata, but majority of the people, they have that negativity and employment bias. When they want to take the married woman and a working mother, generally they hesitate to give her more responsibilities. They're not very sure whether she can continue the job or not. The wage gap, here I want to point out in UK and USA also, they reported that women get only 65% of the salary what man gets for the same job. And also in UK, women quoted that it will take generations for women to have the equality and benefits what men get it. So you can imagine the state of affairs in our country, the developing country. And the sexual harassments, nobody need to talk about it, livid comments, and also, sexist remarks, and the molestations and all these things, and the safety concern. If she has to work night duties and things like that, she has to fend herself. She has to be careful. If something goes wrong, you're not careful. That's a statement anybody will pass, including women. We women pass the comment, she's not careful. That is the state of affairs for the working mothers in the workplace, and no special privileges except that she has got maternity leave. After that, she has to have all the things. She has to manage herself. No special entitlements. If the child is sick or she has got sick, she has to forego the salary or forego all the leave. No flexible working hours. No, if somebody is given flexible hours, she wants to work and little work there. Unfortunately, I'm sure about it. A lot of men, other women and men compete. Why are you giving favors to her? They never look at the efficiency or the work, and nobody helps us. This is where we women, we human beings, we are not helping other women. And breastfeeding is the problem. And women, 3 months, she's still, lactating, and poor thing, she has to leave the child and that, deprive the child of the breastfeeding because no facilities at the workplace for the children to be fed. So that's a problem. And coming to home, she has got the conflicts about self-identity. Oh, I'm a doctor, or I'm PhD, but what is that I'm doing? No, I'm taking care of the children, or I'm not able to do. Like my colleagues, men, they are producing papers. I'm not onto academics. So I'm not able to do it. She has problems with self-identity and about our womanhood and motherhood. She has got confusion about the roles because the roles are increasing for her. Responsibilities are increasing. And the relationship, their boss, subordinates, equals, and here, mother-in-law, husband, children, other in-laws if they are living. So you have a lot of social responsibility, and she's wondering about the rewards, which reward she wants. The reward of, being called a good officer, or reward of being called a good worker, or the reward of being called a good mother or a good wife. So she's confused, and she has got stress problem with time management. She also has only 24 hours. She sleeps for 6 hours or 7 hours. She has got only 18 hours or 16 hours for her to look after herself, to look after children, prepare them, and see that the books are kept, they are being educated, they study well, and all these things, and preparing things for husband and preparing things elderly people. So she has got so many rules and responsibilities, but the time is limited. So the time management becomes a big issue for her, and personal management, taking care of her physical health, mental health, and her sexual issues. She has interest in sex, but she's not able to. Husband is demanding, and he sulks that she's not available to her. And the prejudices and the comments. The working women, no, she is neglecting home, she's neglecting children, she's very cruel. It is natural, it's not natural, she's doing unnatural job. These are the comments she has at home. And so, what are the physical health issues she develops? And I don't want to go into details. You ask any working woman from head to toe, she has got pains and aches. She has got pain syndromes. She has got dyspepsia. She has got irritable bowel. She develops early hypertension, menstrual irregularities, DUBs and fibroids and sexual dysfunctions. What is that? At what cost? She's working and looking after the thing. The stress, the hypothalamus pituitary will not be thinking, oh, poor thing. Let us not overstrain her, but it happens automatically. And what are the things? Morbidity and mortality. She's prone for heart diseases, early cancers and accidents. She's confused. She's worried about the time management. And when she's not able to, when somebody criticizes, she attempts suicide. And many of the women I know, whoever comes, when I ask them, they say they take Trica. Madam, I take Trica. Madam, I take Compos. Many of the women, they are forced to take these benzodiazepines. These are the health concerns. Mental health issues, I don't think I need to talk about it. But the women health issues, they constitute 14% of the global burden of the disease all over the world. And rates of depression and anxiety are 2 to 3 times higher in women than men. And most often, the depressions, we all notice depression, bipolars, and suicide attempts, they can start with the childbirth or, the moment she's stressed in the marital life. And common anxiety disorders, PTSD, somatoform disorder, plenty. And other things, reproductive related problems, PMDD, postpartum blues, depression, psychosis, and early menopause. Many women, they undergo menopause, and because of the menstrual problems, they also go for early hysterectomy. And she has problems in the relationships, sexual relationships, to the extent of marital rape, because husbands force them to have sex, and she has orgasmic and libidinal problems. And also, I'd say number of husbands saying that we are having extramarital affairs because you are not available. You are working women and you are focusing more on children and work. And women also, they're lured into relationships. I have a number of women who confide and talk to them because they feel, rejected by husband, and the colleagues, they view them and they just get into that. And then domestic violence and other violence, I don't need to talk about it. And though it is not deliberate, neglect of children and elderly in the house, negative social attitude and prejudices she has in relationships. So before I go on to the problems in child, I just want to say how important the mother, being a child psychiatrist, I feel that it's my responsibility to tell women how important you are in the development and producing a personality is yours, most of it, and your child is adolescent. And preschool, you facilitate emotional, social, language, communication development. At school going, you help the child to develop self-control, orderliness, industry, honesty, so that his behavior is regulated. And adolescence, you impart moral codes, ideals, personality development, you help women. And so women transits from protector through teacher to mentor. And she's throughout role model, not only for girls, for sons also. There are a number of sons, they model it, and a lot of they appreciate. Yeah, a lot of details or anything. I just want to say for work and what is happening to the children. And they followed up, especially Denmark and Switzerland, America and Australia. They followed up the children of the working women till their adolescent, and they try to find out the effect. So and there are multi-centric studies and independently done. The variables they studied are education of the mother. What is her qualification? And what is the job category she has, whether she is from the lower category of job or a higher category or corporate job, type of work. Is it she is doing a part-time job, full-time job, or number of hours she's away from home, time of joining the job after childbirth, family income, what is her contribution, and spousal and family involvement, and the child rearing. Child variables, the studies on the development and psychiatric disorders like ADHD and other disruptive disorders, anxiety disorders, and academic achievement or deterioration and later adjustment. These are all the studies I could on the child development. So what are the findings? I just give summary. They are very, very varied. They found that when the mother go for work, if the children, preschool children, when they are small, it doesn't impact their behavior and academics. Because children, I mean, they just want caretakers and somebody to take. So we don't find much behavioral disturbance. They found if mother is around, they have good motor development, emotional development, cognitive development with a sustained contact. The negative effects they have seen below 3 years of age is that emotional development may be impaired, and these children, they may develop anxiety, depression at later ages, and they have problems in later life solving problems. And they also found that negative effects in children, especially male children, when they are kept in the kindergarten, they develop a lot of behavior problems. Also in America, Boston, the study shows that working women's children, they are overweight or obese. The reason is these children go for junk food because mother is not available to give them healthy food. So this is the reason they found a few negative and few positive effects. How about the children who are going to school? They found mixed results. They found that few in the employed mother's children, they found hyperactivity, ODD-like symptoms, and learning disturbances. But few studies say that initially maybe these are the problems. When mother is, adding to the income and she's giving better life and she's being respected and she can manage the children's education, they found that it is an asset. And all these behaviors are less. And good academic and social adjustment in the primary school children if mothers are employed. And coming to finally academics and life adjustment till teenage, when they found that initially there may be limited impact on the behavior, and the long effect, they found that cognition education of the children and employed mothers are very good. You can find out these are the studies from USA and Australia. That means they give so much importance to the life of children and also life of women. That's why things are better. And children of mothers with limited hours of part-time job, they had very high grade point average compared to unemployed mothers and full-time workers. This is from Denmark. It's a wonderful study. They followed up 1 lakh and odd the children of mothers who are working. And they found that Denmark is a wonderful country, I say, in the world. They are they are conscious about child rights, they are conscious about women rights, and they as you know, the what you call the pleasure quotient is very high in that country. So they found that a mother who has flexible time and she spends more time with the children and work, she could produce children with great academic competence. And no academic and behavioral disorders in children when mothers join the duty early, because children get accustomed to used to. And better academic achievement and job placement with good adaptability of the girls. This I've seen in our country also in my practice. The people who are working mothers, their daughters are very competent, they get into good courses and they get into jobs compared to their sons, because they model mothers and they see how mothers work and they get a lot of cooperation and guidance from mother. And poor adaptability of children with non-working member. So that means it tells us that it's a varied, but definitely working women gives quality time and she could guide and she could help the children to come out in their, personality development, also in academics. So the protective factors are that she gets support at home, workplace, and society. She can do well, and the work balance. And if she has mental health issues, she finds it difficult. And socioeconomic people who are from the lower socioeconomic background, when they go for work, they get little money and they spend a lot of hours, but they will be neglecting the family for the money they get it. Whereas higher educated and economically higher people, they can give better life to the children and better guidance. So longer hours of work also damages the child-parent relationship, and it can also disturb their emotional as well as academic points. So the working mothers, if they're little older, they can do better service. And they found that in America, nearly 60 to 80% of the working mothers, mind you, working mothers are below 18 years. They themselves are not mature and they're not able to handle their children. So this is the state of affairs. And so vulnerable factors, we need to look at your age, your education, your socioeconomic status. These need to be seen. So what is the need of the hour? So that means women need to get jobs with the brain, and they need to produce economy to the country and to the economy to the family. And then they should get the privileges, entitlements, and medical insurance through the organization where she works, and she should have flexible working hours and predictable scheduling so that she can take care of home as well as the children. And there should be universal child care and pre-kindergartens. Here I always have the idea, women who are educated, who are not working, I think who are rich, they should start these organizations and give employment to a lot of women. It could be, the sweepers, or it could be childcare women, or the small teachers, the, social workers. That means women only can do for women, and they can do it. Universal childcare. And because there is what you call element of femininity and motherhood in that, women can do a better job. Access to affordable health care. I think our government services, medical services are abysmally poor, and the private sector is very expensive. So I think the government has to look into this and see that women get the affordable health care, and then enforcement of anti-discrimination, anti-violent laws. I am not going to go into details. And strengthen social security and retirement benefits like Western countries and the Scandinavian countries. And here I would like to say, who is going to help to bring the women equal with man in human or humane treatment? Gloria Steinem, she's the one, she's a feminist, she's an activist, and she is a journalist in America. Right now, I think she is in the 80s. Beautifully, she quoted, the story of women's struggle for equality belongs to no single feminist, not to any organization, but to the collective efforts of all who care about human rights. That means we need to look at the human rights and human beings, both men and women of all ages and categories. So what is that women need to do? No coping. How she need to cope up, how she can become a contemporary woman. One, I put the mnemonics. She has to educate herself, educating self to whatever capacity she can. She gets a good education so that she becomes employable. Next, she will have monetary independence. Next, professionalism. I tell, at least in my life, I had seen, being very professional, be with men or with anybody, do your profession well, with passion. You will be recognized and you will do justice to your gender. Next, organize yourself and lead an orderly life. Work within boundaries. Don't stretch yourself just because your boss gives you some favor, or your husband gives you something, or your family and everybody call you, you're a wonderful woman, you are a superwoman. No, don't stretch. Work within your boundaries. Emotional regulation. Doing all these things, you get emotionally drained out or you get angry. Just cool yourself. The best thing in our Indian culture is, yoga, meditation. At least I found it after so many years of struggle and, working and, finding a place for myself. But I now found place for myself. I do yoga for 1 hour. I do cycling. I do walking. I do cooking. And I have my life. The COVID, I thank COVID for that, because it made me know what I am, what I wanted in my life. So the emotion regulation, I got it through yoga and meditation, and respect other human beings. Whether it's a man, I tell you, as rightly pointed out with Dr. Ramakrishnan, see, not all men are bad. Majority of the men are good. There are a few, similarly, not all women are virtuous people. But what I mean to say, we are all human beings. Please respect other human beings because you have to live with other human beings to take the help, to give help. So we are human beings. And model empowered women, people who managed all the while their life situation, they went through the struggles, model them. I model my mother for what she has, like women character she had, wonderful cooking she used to do, the way she handled her 10 children. It's a difficult thing to task. I mean, I just can't imagine. So I model a lot of things from my mother. I model my father. He was a very honest man. He was a student of Sir C.V. Raman. The work he has done and, the precision he has, the time management. So I learned that means you model people who are very good in your family or people around and be a model for your children. For that, you need to work hard. You need to have character. You need to have competency. If your children have to model you, that women can do it. Engage in healthy lifestyles, diet, your sleep, your recreation, your hobbies, and your time, your profession, manage beautifully and go for yoga and meditation again. That is a healthy lifestyle. Networking, don't be within your family or with your own people and kitty parties. No, you just go out, not only your profession, meet other people, know what is happening around. Train self to be resilient, how to handle your problem, how to become strong, whom to take help from, and be yourself. I want to be Gauri Devi. I don't want to be Indira Gandhi. I don't want to be Sunita Krishnan. I don't want to be anybody because I know what I am. Because they're good people. I'm not saying they have their virtues. They have become. I don't want to imitate. I don't want to be like somebody else. I don't want to be like other man. He may be earning money. I don't want to be anybody else. I want to be what I am, what God created me. That gives me satisfaction. That gives me resilience. No competition, no anger, no frustration. So this is personal management. Family management, the best thing I would like to say is, please train your husbands, train your children to work. And this is something which, this is something which I found without your knowledge, you will be teaching your spouse, your children, your family members. You start doing and ask them to join you. They just join. You just give them small tasks and it becomes a habit. So please see that your husband not only shares your income, he shares childbearing also. And it becomes a habit and it's not difficult. Men can be tutored into that. You can negotiate. And it all depends on the art you have. Women have that art. We can do it. Allot duties as per the abilities of your children. And don't say that don't go and do it. Come on, we'll do it. You are very capable of doing it. Women have the capacity to know the ability and give them the work and make them do it. That's why she has got leader qualities and managerial qualities. Train children to be independent and competent. The first thing my daughter-in-law, who is Swedish, she told me, in India, the fun thing which I noticed, she has been coming to India from her teenage. She told me, and you really spoiled your children. You spoil because you feed them into the mouth till their teenage. And you give them, their tiffin box. You feed them and you give them their clothes. You go with them and buy the things. That is something which is unheard of in other countries. So this is something, when you want your people to be in the contemporary life, make them competent, independent, and values like self-control. This is something which I want to tell. We have to teach our children, because the girls Sunita was talking about, they don't know what it is about their, how their body or the details can go into the net and they can damage their career. So we have to teach. And also similarly, the boys, the sexual perversion they have, or, the adventures, misadventures. I think we need to give them the values. Mother can only do that. Self-control, orderliness, honesty, hard work, these are the things, and character development. I think our scriptures are wonderful. At least I'm enjoying the scriptures wherein it's mentioned how a mother or father need to teach their children about the values, home values, societal values, your responsibilities. I think we need to teach them. And so that the family becomes a unit where the character builds in your children and they make a good society. Gender specific and gender sensitive training need to be told. Except for the childbearing, the girl and boy should learn everything. Girl should know driving, girl should know, calculations, they should know banking, they should know everything. Similarly, boys also know cooking and everything. That means should be gender sensitive, and the quality of time the mother and father should spend in education, social gatherings. When you are doing puja, ask children to join, ask them to get flowers, ask them to get coconut from outside, so that their contribution makes them involved in the family. So don't try to do everything. So give responsibilities and enjoy their company and see that they enjoy your company. Societal management, I don't talk much about it because it is at the government level where the women organizations, they need to be very clear what the women requires, the working women, working mothers. And so we need to talk about, what we require at home, what we require at office, especially child rearing and, child care. And then we have to get into the women organizations and participate in programs. As she was telling, Sunita telling, we are all working parallel. All departments, agriculture, revenue, medical, all the social agencies, we all running parallel. We think about our development and things like that. We never merge. Only when we merge, we can do, justice to the society and to the women. Train self and also train other women in the human resource development so that you can do small tasks and get money for the home, and help your maid servants. I always help my maid servants to educate their sons or educate themselves. Give them small laptops which you have, or give them little money for buying books. So these are the things which we can do for women. And workplace exploitation, violence, and social atrocities. If it is happening right in front of, please don't keep quiet. Fight, raise your voice. Even though she is not related to you, please raise voice because she is your gender. So you need to do that. Spiritual counseling for your children, how they value the societal values and our spiritual values, and respect for elders and respect for women. These are the things which we need to teach our young girls and boys. And pre and post marital counseling about, as she was telling, about our body and sexuality, and how you need to protect, and how you need to be careful with dealing with people in the surroundings. So what I say is the contemporary women, they need to aim at competency, not consolation. These are my words, and I always tell women about it. You be competent, automatically you will get everything. Don't look for consolation. Expect empathy, no sympathies for women. Strive for interdependence, not independence. Independence is important, but interdependence, you can't do anything alone. So look for independence and not dependence. Don't depend too much on men or other people or gadgets. Work to command respect, not favors. Fight for equal human rights, not concessions. Should get realistic support, not unimplemented laws. Negotiate for a healthy, happy environment, whether it's husband or workplace, not material comforts. And to conclude, I say contemporary women are compelled to move out of the narrow spheres of family circle. This is very important and it is inevitable, and challenges are varied for self and with family and society, and the consequences are painful initially, but they are pleasurable at the end when you achieve something. Coping with courage, confidence, and competence make them strong and empowered. So I would like to conclude my talk by saying what a strong woman is. Strong women are not simply born. It's not that women are born strong. So we are forged through the challenges of life. With each challenge, we grow mentally and emotionally. We move forward with our head held high and strength that cannot be denied. A woman who has been through the storm and survived. We are the warriors, we are the women, we are the contemporary women. We can change the society with men, joining us. We have to see it is our responsibility, not shy away or, exclude them, include them, modify them, negotiate them, and make the society a wonderful society. And it's not easy, as I said, but we need to go through struggle. Maybe it takes generations. I think if my generation starts, my son and my daughter, they change the next generation. I think it's a generational change that brings equality. Nothing else, no feminist, no organization, no governments, but it is our moral strength, our social responsibility to make the good human being in the society morally and, the competent wise. I think this is how I would like to give the message for this women empowerment. Women empowerment is not isolated entity. It is a universal entity involving all human beings with who work for human rights, and all men and women of all ages, right from childhood to old age. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to interact with you. Thank you.
Thank you, madam. Thank you so much. Wonderful lecture. And you have brought the whole array of womanhood, poverty, women discrimination, job discrimination, pay discrimination, all these things, and how women's roles are different. And I used to tell women's brain is very complex. Women's network of neuron network itself is complex. Even God fears for woman. Actually, that is reality. Okay, so and sincerely appreciate what you have enumerated, what other modern girls has to follow. So nice lecture, madam. I think we can all open for some discussion. Before that, I would like to have my own questions because I got the mic now. So there are so many unanswered questions in our system. That's what is the problem. See, Western countries, they say all law, law is very strict, USA and all, but still crime rate and sexual violence is more in Western countries than in India. That is a paradox, okay. And what I would say, the law should be such a one, there should not be any bailable, it should be a non-bailable violence, offense. You should not give bail. That is one thing. And the law, the result should be, judgment should be done immediately, as early as possible. The delay in judgment causes lots of injury to the women. Like Deepika Padukone acted in one movie, wonderful movie. I don't know, I forget it is in tip of my
Chapak.
Chapa. Such a wonderful portrait of a woman, this thing. For no fault of her, she's suffering. So judgment should be fast. That is another thing. And I appreciated the encounter in Hyderabad. That rape victims, they were shot on encounter, over. Or else it will go for 20 years and he will go free. See, that is another thing. Law should be very strict about it. And another thing I would like is, see, in buses and all, they put smoking is injurious to health, cancer is this thing, all these things they put. Sexual violence is offense. And capital punishment is the one that's everywhere that should advertisement should be there by the government agencies. Wherever you see, if you are sexually violate, you will be for punishment, 10 years minimum. Like that, they should put things that should go into the mind of the people. See, and another thing like that, how they give 100 ambulance number, this 181 number, it should be there everywhere. If you have got any, if you know any sexual offense, report to 181. See, that should be the message that keep on going. Further, we need some celebrity to come forward to give an advertisement and other things. There is another thing that may stimulate. And survivors of rape, they should also come forward, express yourself. If you keep expressing what are the agonies, people may think and they may advise other people. See, one thing that discussion about sexual violence, how bad it is, should be in among youngsters. So the discussion only will disseminate awareness. That's what I used to think about. See, these are some things which I wanted to add. And like Vivekananda, how he took the world by storm by saying, "My dear brothers and sisters." He started his Chicago lecture like that. If you have this brotherhood feeling everywhere, it is spread that I think there will not be any place. Cheta Chechi, that I also used to say. Cheta Chechi. So maybe that may give the culture little bit change. So in the office, you should say that in my daughter works in a software company. They say, bro. They don't say name and all. Bro, brother. That's what they talk to the colleagues. So in that way, what bro, what's this? This is what they talk. So this type of change in culture may reduce the violence and other things. Another thing, the Me Too campaign is one way it is giving lot of encouragement, but at the same time, it is bringing some negativity also. People, for namesake or for publicity's sake, they misuse the Me Too campaign. So again, some of the what you call unanswered questions from my side. Thank you.
If I may answer Dr. Ramakrishnan, two things that I want to answer. One is India has one of the best legislations, both for children and for adults. We already have capital punishment, especially for any rape below the age of 12, it is 100% capital punishment. The problem now is not in the law, but it is in the implementation of the law. We have some of the best laws in the country, in the world. But unfortunately, systemically and structurally, we are very poor. Anything, it doesn't get implemented in the right way. That is one thing that I want to mention. The second thing that I want to mention is that while we talk about reducing of sexual violence, whenever we talk about sexual violence, our entire concentration is on the women. One Nirbhaya happens or one Disha happens, all of us are now going and teaching our daughters how to do taekwondo and, go pepper spray. So basically, what are we teaching our daughters? Be scared. Always be on the alert. Any minute anything happens, come on, you start with your karate pose, or you take out your pepper spray and hit back. So this is what we're teaching our children, to be paranoid. We don't actually focus our attention on our boys and our men.
Exactly.
Why are we talking about sexual violence and safety of women to women themselves? If we have to talk about safety of women, we have to talk to men and our boys.
Exactly.
The abusers who are coming out are not coming from some other planet. There are sons, there are brothers, there are fathers, there are uncles, they're coming from our own families. So until and unless we don't change the lens from which we are seeing sexual violence. So if we are looking at sexual violence as a problem of women, we have to look at sexual violence as a problem of men.
Correct.
And changing the attitude of our own boys and men on how we visualize, men and women, which means that our own gender stereotypes have to change. We have created all kinds of construct now. So, blue is for boys and green, or the pink is for girls, or some funny things like that. Doll for girls, car and gun for boys. We are creating a gender construct. We are responsible for creating a construct of femininity and masculinity, and also a construct that, woman's role is for as a sexual object. So we have no problems in advertisements that come. You have to sell a men's underwear. A woman is coming and standing. There are no problems about that. Nobody is opposing it. So a big part of our problem is also our silence.
Correct.
The silence of accepting messaging, sexualized images. These are the things that we need to challenge within our own families. And that is where the change will come. The change is not something that comes. Gloria Steinem, Dr. Gauri is a very dear friend. She's 86 years old. And like you, she does 1 hour of yoga I've known her for the last 30 years. And for 30 years, I've seen her practicing thing. And one of the favorite things that she says again and again, she says, nobody can bring change. We ourselves have to become the change agent that we want to see in this world. So I think a lot of problems of sexual violence comes from each one of us. And until unless we don't challenge it, nothing is going to change.
I fully agree with you. But maybe as a psychiatrist, as a medical scientist, which is very realistic, is that, what I mean to say is why we have different genders, men and women. their hormones, their behavior, the brain conditioning is different. And women, I'm not saying that women need to be passive or anything, but what I mean to say is you have your nature or God or whatever it may be, the gender assigned things are there, and they are going to be different in certain areas. And as a what you call it, I give sex education, sex therapy. Like people who don't have they have problems with the sex therapy, we do teach them sex things. What I mean to say is that these are assigned or gender-based things. They need to keep themselves to them. At the same time, I think when to use and how to control, these are the things I think girls and boys need to be. I'm not saying that women say that, no, I can go around anywhere and man cannot do anything. Man says that this is my, kind of my reaction and I do it. So each one are irresponsible that way, both women and men. I think that I would like to inculcate in our, right from childhood. Be responsible. You are a boy. You are responsible to yourself and you are responsible to society. Women, you are responsible to yourself. After rape, we all go and make a noise. What happens? The people who are raped are killed. They will not come back. The pain they went through, we can't. So I believe, as a psychiatrist, as a medical person, I believe in prevention. Prevention is by training our children to be gender sensitive and
Dr. Ramakrishna, sir.
I think that's
May
where
I talk, sir?
Yes,
Dr. Prasad Rao.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Next. Sir, Dr. Prasad Rao likes to
Yes.
share his views.
First of all, I would like to congratulate the South Zone leadership, especially the President and Secretary, and the team chaired by Radhika, Nivedita, and all for this wonderful session this evening. I would just like to add just one or two important points. I lived with Dr. Gauri for 4 decades, and I imbibed quite a lot from her. She was my senior in SPMC, and we worked together in ASHA for the last 2 decades. She is a role model for all the women psychiatrists, so I congratulate her. And Sunita, you have taught and sensitized us, but I think we should, IPS South Zone should somehow get a little more into the action. And I've been working with the sex call, the distress sex call from the police for the last 2 decades at Hyderabad. You are right. I think people are reaching out, but I thought both of you did cover quite a lot. But the most important change which happened in the last decade is the social media movement, be it Facebook, be it all, has changed or changing the role models as well. And I sincerely congratulate Dr. Gauri and Sunita for these wonderful talks, and particularly Dr. Gauri. Really, it's a kind of a, I would say, heart shaking, because you gave the real life experiences, what you experienced. Thank you, madam.
Thank you. Thank you, Prasad.
Unmute, sir. Ramakrishnan, sir.
Any other questions coming up? Dr. Radhika, Dr. Indumati?
I've seen a question on the chat box.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much for your stunning presentation, Sunita ma'am, and enlightening presentation by Gauri ma'am. A lot of compliment in the chat box. Only one question is posted. The others are mesmerized, I think. The question is, one young girl preparing a curriculum for future generation to build life skills. She wants to know from Sunita ma'am how she can incorporate sex education and mental health in right manner in the curriculum. That is her question.
I think Jayashree is the person who asked this question. Jayashree, thank you so much for this question. 3 things we need to start our presumptions from. One is that this generation of children have far, far better exposure than we ever had. I come from a generation, and I'm sure Gauri ma'am and all come from another generation where we thought that 2 flowers touch child will be born, or two pigeons will, touch their beaks, and, a life is born like that. That is the kind of world that, exposure that we have. This generation comes from a different exposure. They're exposed to many things. There's a whole lot world of sexualized images, sexualized world, which has become very normalized. So any life skill education should be rooted from the exposure of the present generation. At the same time, understanding that there is another generation which is behind, which is not exposed. My 6-year-old nephew tells me how to use the mobile properly. He knows far more about the mobile apps than I do. So here is a generation which is slightly more educated than you, technologically and otherwise, which means that they can actually put you down. And that is why whenever you do something like a life skill program, you need to create a parallel program for the parents and also for teachers. Otherwise, this widening gap between the generation of, my 6-year-old nephew telling my mother, 70-year-old mother, that, you don't know anything. You don't talk, you keep quiet, which means that this woman's wisdom will never get transmitted to this child of 6. The child is already throwing you out of his thing. He thinks he's far more wise than this 70-year-old person. And therefore that gap has to be, bridged, which means that parallelly, whatever life skill program that you do, you have to, have a curriculum for the parents and for things. So for parents, teachers associations, for teachers, you need to create a proper design. The third thing that I would like to say is sex and sexuality. You need to understand from the contemporary sense. Today, gender roles, it's not just about men and women. There is a third gender. It's a whole world of sex and sexuality that is emerging. Need to understand that. And as Gauri ma'am rightly pointed out, I'm not a believer of equality. I don't believe in equality. I believe in equity. I believe that men and women are different. They have their different roles. The entire balance comes from a symbiotic relationship of you understanding my strengths and I understanding your strengths, and both of us complementing our weaknesses. So very important in life skill education is understanding boundaries. What is love? What is a boundary for love? What is sex? What is a boundary for sex? How far? And creating ownership for your decisions, creating ownership and responsibility for your body is something that we need to teach our young generation. And so the curriculum should be designed. Life skill is also about saying no, being assertive, drawing your boundaries, and experiencing your sexuality not as something that you should be guilty about, is something as, and I want to quote Gauri ma'am, to be you, just be you. It's not in competition of others, so you can't, so I am beautiful, so I have to be A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. My body should be like this, or I am man, so I have to be like that. So there's no competition between anything else. So these are some of the various things that you should look at when you create a curriculum for life skills for thing. But I just want to reiterate something, that just creating something for the present generation is not enough. You need to parallelly create something for the parents and the teachers too.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much.
There is another question by Aravindan Ganeshan in the chat box. Madam, it is for both Gauri madam and Smita madam. The question says, how to teach our daughters how to behave with men, and how to teach our sons how to respect women. I mean, most of it's kind of an overlap thing, but then the more I think the focus is on how to, or advise the girls how to behave with men, so that there are no misunderstandings. I think there is a lot of difference in perception which happens, which women or girls are not aware of, and in consequence of which they fall into some kind of traps or other things. So what are the caution points or warning signs that the girls should know about how men perceive, and what is the line they need to draw when they are actually behaving with men? For example, I had a child whose father, she felt that she was having a bad touch. But then she also likes her father, and she doesn't mind sitting with him or being beside him. She's a teenage-old girl, but then sometimes she's not happy with the touch the father gives her sometimes. So this question is very relevant in that respect, that what is the advice we can give the daughters or the girls? What is the extent they can behave, or what is the warning signs they should learn, and how to deal with them? It is open for both madams. Anyone can take it from us.
Yeah.
Ma'am, you want to answer? After that, I will.
Yes.
No, what I mean to say is, I think it starts teenager asking you now is a little unusual in the sense that means that the parents haven't really taken care about teaching the child about the sexuality. Her sexuality, the behavior of the other gender. So these are the things that should be taught. When I was a child, I used to be very friendly, and I would go around. And one day, like my brother, he came and went and told my father, she's playing with boys. I was hardly, I think, 9 years or 8 years. When my brother told my father, please don't go and talk to boys or men. So the first question I asked my father, because he said it in a very strict, straight way, that you are not talking to men. I said, see, listen, you are a man, I'm talking to you. He's a brother, he's a man, I'm talking to you. So my father had a hell of a time with me, I know, when I look back. So what I mean is, you do question, the children do question, and they ask, why not? I think we should be prepared with the answers much before the questions are being asked. So you need to tell the girl about the nature of the boys. The body structure, it's different, the roles are different, and their understanding about women is different. Similarly, the girls also should be told about how they look and they think about it. It need not be the same way. And very important thing which I teach all these children and adolescents is in a very, very scientific way. I take the plants, I take the animals, I take mathematics into consideration, and then I teach them. That means you need to teach sexuality to the children according to their age, with examples which are very simple and scientific, which is appealing to them. You don't give the moral values first and then talk about it. You talk about moral values a little later, after you explain to them, once they understand. I think if you can do that, the children accept. Like say for example, the children say that boy, I still remember a case where the girl told me that, the boy showed his genitals, and he asked me to show the genitals. She is 8 years. And she came and said, what is wrong with that? I said, there's nothing wrong. Maybe he's educating you about the genitals and he just want to know what it is. Maybe he didn't have, a girl in his family, so he didn't see about it. So I just put it, I never, show my surprise or anything. Then I said, see, older people, if they come and ask you and they try to touch you, this is not accepted. It's an accident. It happened to you. And generally, you don't want to show your body parts, and you don't want to share your book, or you don't want to share anything. Your body is very, very important. This is your personal thing. So you should not expose it. You should not show it to everybody. So slowly the value things I told later. So the girl never felt it's something wrong, or I never want to put her to shame. So the moment we put the children to shame, they become more curious. So the way we teach is that teach them scientifically, teach them the facts. Don't give them all fiction things. Give them the facts, give them in a scientific way, and convince them, and then tell about the moral values, the consequences, how you need to protect yourselves. and what is needed. I think you need to know about these details, the sexual aspects and all those things at the age 12 years or maybe at 16 years or just before your marriage. Maybe there are certain things which you need to know. So if you tell them, the curiosity is taken care. I mean, that's what I do throughout my child psychiatric practice. Tell them the facts, tell them scientifically, tell them how they need to take care, and then tell you the values, and then the last one is the moral values and things. Because the moment you tell the moral values, either they make them feel guilty or they defy. So the moral values, they have to learn, they have to imbibe. The moment they know about it, otherwise, I mean, they never feel ashamed or they feel guilty about it.
Just adding to what Gauri ma'am said, I think children learn from not what you speak, but what you act. So how you behave, how you are in your own intimate partner relationship, inside your own families, the people, these are some very important aspects and how we act our life out, which becomes the role modeling for children to understand and learn. Having said that, do we, our own families, our own spaces, are we creating open spaces for families to have open discussions? Can our children feel comfortable sitting on the table, dining table, and talk to my father or mother saying that actually I don't feel attracted, I'm a woman, I don't feel attracted to a man, I feel very attracted to women? Is that wrong? You know, do we create that kind of a safe space within our own families for our children to speak about their sex and sexuality, especially after the child is, you know, about 10 years? These are confusing messages. There are conflicting issues that is coming within. But do we create that space? I'm afraid we don't. Most often our children have to find other dubious means to go and find these answers, and more dubious means and more different ways that they go and try to find these answers, the chances of they getting the wrong messaging and understanding it wrongly and misinterpreting is very high. And that is why it's very important for all of us to create open, safe spaces within our families to have open conversations with our children. In that, I would like to mention that we are so scared to bring in difficult topics. No, I'm also a film producer. I don't know if any of you know that I also produce feature films. That's actually my bread and butter. I'm a full-time volunteer in Prajwala, but my bread and butter is making movies. And one of the movies that I made, which got 3 national awards and 4 state Nandi awards and around 19 international awards, is a film named as Na Bangaru Talli. Now, Na Bangaru Talli is right now running on Netflix, but it came in theaters. There were hardly anybody who went to the theaters to see this movie. This movie is a real life story about a girl who gets trafficked and in a very strange situation where the father himself is a trafficker. The father has not trafficked her, he traffics other girls, and his family doesn't know that he's a trafficker. And in very strange circumstances, his own daughter gets trafficked. Very, very powerful film based on a true incident. A big part of my friend's circle actually told me, Sunita, we don't want to take our family, you know. This is too difficult for us to see, you know. Such is the same situations when we talk about rape, sexual violence. We don't want to talk about all this within our family, you know. We may read it in the newspaper, but we want, you know, we feel bad, we feel sad, but we will not make that as a dinner table conversation. We have to make some very difficult topics as our dinner table conversation, whether it is trafficking, whether it is sexual violence, whether it is rape, whether it is abuse, whether it is, you know, different forms of exploitation that can happen. Make it normal for people to talk about it so that boundaries and precautions then becomes an open conversation. It does not become post facto after the experience, learning from the experience. I can tell you, as the rape survivor myself, I'm a gang rape survivor. I was raped at the age of 16 by 8 men. You know, you don't need to learn by getting raped. That is not the way your children should learn from anything. There is no need for any of us to reinvent the wheel. It is very important for us to create spaces for these difficult conversations. And in those conversations is where you find the signs and symptoms on how to protect yourselves. There is this young boy who saw my movie, called me up at 1 o'clock in the night crying. And it was such a difficult conversation that happened on the phone at 1 in the night. She said, "Madam, are you Sunita Krishnan?" I said, "Yes, I've just come out of the theater watching the movie." I said, "Thank you so much. I wanted to cut the line." He says, "Madam, can you give me 2 minutes time?" He says, "Every week on a Saturday evening, I go to Guruvayur." Now, I belong to Kerala. So, and he was giving me the, so I was thinking, okay, Guruvayur is a temple town, so what is the big deal? Unknown to me, Guruvayur is also having one of the largest prostitution areas. He says, "I go to Guruvayur to buy sex." And when I saw this film, there's a particular scene in that film, where this girl is falling at the feet of the brothel keeper and saying, "Please don't send me to the next customer because it pains." And this boy just, in the entire 3 hours film, he has picked that 30 seconds of scene that has hit him hard on his head. And he says, "Madam, I never knew it pains. I never knew it was such a humiliation for this girl. I used to think I'm the only man, but I never thought that after me also there is somebody who will come and buy sex from her." Now, some very difficult visual stories like this, if it becomes a dinner table conversation, you're teaching your children several things, and that is the kind of open conversation that you need to create. Not from shying away from reality, but bringing reality on your center table and helping your children understand reality, cope up with reality, and also develop the coping mechanisms to handle that reality if that happens to them. That is the only way. Real life is the only teacher that can give you the right signs and symptoms. No Sunita Krishnan can tell you what are the signs and symptoms of cheating, because that keeps changing every minute. I am feeling like such an outdated model. I can't tell you. Till 2019, I used to think, till 2020 February, I thought that I was a master in understanding how traffickers operate, how cheating happens to women and girls across the country. Now, December 2020, I am reviewing my position. Today, I would say I'm in the kindergarten. I have one more whole world of learning that I need to do, because in modus operandi in the last 10 months has changed dramatically. So let's make reality not a matter to be shied of, but a matter for us to explore and understand and build the capacities of our younger generation on how to cope up with this reality. That is the only insulation I would say.
I fully agree. It's like each one's experience is different. All our life experiences, all aspects, they are definitely different. And I think whatever we speak our experiential. So one thing I always remember the quote: "Wise people learn from their experience, and wiser people learn from others' experience." So I think we need to combine both. We need to be wise and wiser. That's how I think, as a psychiatrist and as a child psychiatrist, I always believe in the preventive. So we talk about early intervention and other things. So before the illness occurs, we need to identify and we need to see that it is being prevented. I think especially the life situation is that it's a very complicated one. Number of factors act on that. It's not that it's 1 + 1 is 1. In life situation, 1 + 1 can be 20. So what I would like to say is, please learn from, another thing which Sunita was talking about it. Children might be talking about, touching the gadgets and doing it. No, a lot of parents feel very proud about it. Please don't be proud about it. Yeah, they learned. It's just, a touch and, it is exposed because it's a program like that. But our brain is not like that. So we have to program our children right from childhood. We need to teach them what is life. in a very, very subtle way and let them have our experience. Let them be wiser, let them have our experience, let them also be wise by handling the things around, and let them experience the pain or pleasure of it, and let them choose what is best and what is best for the society and within the confines of the society. I think that's what we need to teach all our children. I think we need to make a beginning.
But
If I have a child, that child, I think I just want the child to be taught the realities of life practically. And I mean, like a lot of people say, like, no, my child operates. Don't be very proud about it. There's nothing, because somebody has did the program and you touch, you get it. But you program the child, how he need to, go about in his life, what is there for him. I think that's what we need to do about it. And another important thing, I'm sure, I think Sunita must have heard about it, is we're all running parallel, unfortunately. Women, men, and all professions, we're all running parallel. We never converge. I make something in my lab. I think about how much money I make, how much damage it causes to the people. We never think about it. Like my son now, he is on to, programming of the games. And I said, see, listen, you may be getting a lot of money, but I'm really worried about the kids. It's a touch with that. I mean, they do games. I said, I'm concerned about the future of the children and the generation of children. So I gave him a lot of feedback to him, so that they don't become addictive and they become more cognitive, positive. So what I mean to say is we all work, the science work parallel, the religion works parallel, our life becomes parallel. So everything is parallel, unfortunately, because we are not converging. We are in the midst of COVID. If we have been converging and we have been, looking at the bad effects and ill effects of what is happening in the society with our own bad things, I think coronavirus would not have touched. So this is something which I like a few generations from now. I think if you can train them the realities of life, what are their responsibilities, how they need to take precautions, I think we can save this planet and from the destruction of both psychological, cyber, as well as physical and all aspects. This is something, at least as a human being, I believe that I think we need to work as human beings, think like human beings, behave like human beings to make this planet host us and bear us.
Main thing, what I will, thank you, madam. Many things we that is not, we don't speak about. Actually, most of the perpetrators, they have childhood trauma and they are from poor parenting. And they are not emotionally attached to anything. They are emotionless people. Moreover, it is a most of vengeance against women, it is a vengeance against the society. They do this type of act. And many are psychotics also. Even at the budding age of 13, 14, if the mother finds out the son's behavior is not right, they are not ready to bring it to the psychiatrist. And they protect, even in spite of so many mischiefs, my son is good. That is the way we protect the future perpetrators. Unless this awakening happens, it is very difficult. This childhood trauma, the parental problem, interpersonal conflict between parents is the root cause of almost all issues. We have to address the system as a family. Thank you, madam. I think it is time. And maybe if there are any more questions, there are no more questions.
Vote of thanks.
Thank you so much.
Yes, madam.
Sunita ma'am, I would like to know your perspective on a particular incident that happened in Kerala a couple of months back. A mother who is an activist actually, and she allowed her children to draw on her nude body. That was a recent event. I think that you might have heard about that. Like when you see that video, the children appears very happy and they're cheerful. They're with lots of enthusiasm. They are drawing. They're doing that painting and all. But the media and the people took that into another level. So I would like to know about your perspective. Will that be considered as a kind of abuse or any kind of that which we can have to be considered with that high intensity of considering the high intensity of the response that people made. And during those kind of discussions when they were making, those children were really undergoing so much of trauma because their mother was undergoing lots of problems, and their mother was being, questioned by people. So I would like to know about your perspective about that.
Smita ji, you're asking a very controversial question. Let me be politically right in answering this question. As per the law, the Juvenile Justice Act, POCSO, and IPC, what happened is illegal. Is illegal. It's a crime.
Okay.
It's a pure crime. So because any sexual act with a child, any sexual contact with a child below the child is, as per CRC, and India has ratified the CRC, our law of land is 18 years, is 100% sexual abuse or rape. Consent is immaterial. That is a law of the land. Even if two children aged 14 are consensually having sex, it would be considered as rape. That is a law of the land. So what this lady did was a criminal act. Exposing her genitals and her body for her children to paint. I think she exposed her breast and she was having her. It's a pure illegal criminal act. And as per the law, she is done something wrong. That's the most politically correct answer that I can give you. My perspective about this entire thing, and that particular woman has some other. I have my own perspective about that lady and her. She was also in the Sabarimala protest. She was one of the ladies who tried to climb up the Sabarimala and all that stuff. So I have my own thing, which is which does not become anyway judgmental in what happened here. From a very pure legal point of view, what she did was wrong.
If there are no other questions, okay. Yeah, okay. So before concluding this program, I would like to thank the stars of today's evening, Professor Gauri Devi Madam and Padma Shri Sunita Krishnan for that beautiful, engaging, enlightening conversations you made. And definitely everybody who participated in the program might have gained new wisdom regarding the women's the new age women's problems and the area in which Sunita ma'am is working. So I thank you both for being here and gracing our new venture. And of course, I would like to thank our president, Dr. Ramakrishnan, and our honorary General Secretary, Suresh Kumar sir, and all the EC members, including, office bearers, including Ramanan sir, and Shahul Amin was here for some time. And without the support of IPS South Zone, office bearers and EC, we would not be able to make this program today. So my heartfelt thanks to the entire South Zone team for making this program happen. And also, I would like to thank all the participants who are ready to attend this program, and they sat all these 2.5 hours with us and interacted with us. I'm very grateful to you all. And also, I would like to thank the technical the support from Atma Hospital, the people behind the technical support for all the help you have done for us. And also, I would like to thank and congratulate the team Samanvi for making this event happen. So I think that with this, we can conclude this program. Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sunita. Thank you, Dr. Gauri Devi, madam, for your.
Thank you.
I like to visit Hyderabad and meet you personally to plan how to work forward.
You're welcome. Thank you.
That I will do definitely, because it is a new opening for all of us. Thank you, madam.
Thank you, madam. Madam Sunita Krishnan and Dr. Gauri Devi, madam. Thank you very much for enlightening us. We look forward to work with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, one and all, for your valuable presence and valuable message that were conveyed. In future also, you will conduct similar programs. Look forward for women empowerment with all our active members of this committee. Thank you, one and all.
Bye.
Okay. Thank you.
Let the Samanvi team and Dr. Suresh Kumar take that for 2 minutes. Dr. Virat, also you are here, sir. You can also join with us, sir, for a few minutes.